Would you please tell us, with respect to the external exam, was it a first step to, or what your first step was?
Well, first step again is to examine the body and document any injuries that are present on the external surface of the body.
And based on your initial observations, what types of injuries did you first observe looking at Ngoc Tran's body?
There were, as I said, blunt impact injuries, including contusions, which is another word for bruise, abrasions, another word for split, lacerations, another word for tearing of the skin.
And at any point did you see or observe hemorrhages?
Yes, well, a contusion is essentially hemorrhage underneath the surface of the skin, and there's hemorrhaging in the laceration of the tears in the skin. There were also conjunctival hemorrhages in the left and the right eyes, and the upper and lower eyelids. And there was hemorrhaging underneath the surface of the skin of the scalp on both the left and right side of the head.
In addition to abrasions, lacerations, contusions, and hemorrhages, did you at any point observe any fractures on Ngoc Tran's body?
Yes.
Now, specifically, drawing attention first to Ngoc Tran's head, you said that you observed multiple injuries on her head?
Yes.
I'm going to place on display for the jury what previously marked Exhibit 40. And if you could, there's a pointer. There was a pointer to the right. If you could just turn, if you want to, if it's comfortable, turn or stand and indicate to the jury. Or if you prefer, you can come to the elbow and secure. You just indicate to the jury and where they are located relative to each other. Do you have an opinion as to whether, first, do those fractures appear to be consistent with having been caused by an instrument or a weapon?
Consistent with that.
And second, do they appear to be consistent with that, with an instrument or weapon having been used multiple times?
Be consistent with that.
Now, you also mentioned hemorrhages. Could you just describe a little bit in more detail for the jury what the term hemorrhage refers to, and then tell us what, if any, hemorrhages you observed on Ngoc Tran?
Well, hemorrhage is just another word for bleeding. And as I mentioned, all the contusions have hemorrhage in the underlying soft tissue. In addition, I did see some hemorrhaging into the muscle underneath the scalp on the left side of the head, and also underneath the scalp on the right side of the head. And as I mentioned, I saw hemorrhaging in the conjunctiva, the thin layer that covers the eye, and also covers the inner part of the upper and the lower eyelids. I saw some areas of hemorrhage there as well.
When you say you saw a hemorrhage into the muscle, what is, how do you reference that in your reports and your notations? What is that called? What type of hemorrhage?
I'm not sure. I have to look at it. I'm not sure.
What is it?
With regard to the left side of the scalp, I described a diffuse hemorrhage into the left temporal muscle, which is this muscle here underneath the left side of the scalp. And with regard to the left area of the right side, I refer to it as spot of hemorrhage, meaning more focal areas of hemorrhage into the right temporal muscle on the right side of our head. Those are measurements that I took of those particular injuries.
And you also note certain descriptive words as well. Based on your examination of the body of Ngoc Tran and your education, training, and experience, do you have an opinion, a reasonable degree of medical certainty regarding the cause of death of Ngoc Tran?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
Chronic infection injuries to her head with the fracture of the skull and shoulder.
What injury did you observe on April 29, 2011?
I saw in subdural wounds to a brain and evidence of contusion to a brain.
Did you attribute that brain injury to any particular blow, any particular injury, or to the totality of the injuries?
I did not attribute any particular injury, but multiple ones.
On the charts of Ngoc Tran's head are consistent with having been inflicted when Ngoc Tran was alive.
They will all be consistent with the process.
Again, why did you stop going to Ngoc Tran's house?
Cái câu hỏi một lần nữa là tại sao bà Hương không có đi tới nhà thờ?
She told me that he doesn't like me and try not to let him call.
Bạn nói với tôi là họ không có thích tôi, cho nên là đừng có gọi nữa.
When you were at some return to the answer,
Tôi phải nói cái câu
and rest on three assignments you've made.
tại vì nó là gặp đến những cái gì mà
I will just forget there's been a little bit but I have to make it.
Okay, I gave you, ladies and gentlemen, a general instruction of how this thing is being used prior.
And what did she say?
rồi bạn nói gì? She said everything, she was very sad. She could not stand it anymore. Then she kept crying.
Did she say anything about what was going on at her house that day?
Bà có đề cập gì đến cái chuyện xảy ra ở nhà của bà ngày đó hay không? She said he looked as though he was possessed by a ghost.
Did she say anything about plans that she had regarding where she was living?
Bà có thể nói gì về cái dự tính của bà ta về cái việc mà bà ta ở đâu không?
Yeah, I know that lần này đã được đi vô taxi.
Yes, she said.
Cũng không thôi thì không thôi ở đây mà mua ra mới không.
Yes, she said this time she was going to move to Texas. If not, if she stayed here, then she would move out and get an apartment.
Did she tell you why she was going to move out of the house?
Bà ta có nói với chị tại sao bà ta lại dọn ra khỏi nhà hay không? She said she could not stand it anymore.
She could not stand what?
Bà ta không chịu đựng cái gì?
Cái bà rất là sợ, cứ nhìn đáng sợ như vậy.
The thing is she was afraid of the way he looked. He looks scary, but it doesn't change.
Could you ask her to explain the phrase that she just said, it doesn't change? What are you referring to?
Có thể nào hỏi cô ta giải thích cái câu nói cô ta nói là nó không thay đổi đó, là đang đề cập tới cái việc gì?
Nói sao thì nhìn nó rất là cứ như vậy hoài, hay cứ về đổ hoài.
Honestly, I could only listen to what she was saying. She said, it's it keeps being like that. The two of them arguing.
And the people that are being referred to when she's saying the two of them are Song Tran and Tay Tran, is that correct?
Và có đúng hay không là hai cái người mà cô ta đề cập tới đó là Song Tran và Tay Tran? Yeah, correct.
Did she mention any financial difficulties?
Bà ta có đề cập tới cái sự khó khăn về tài chính hay không?
Và chỉ nói với con là con kế đưa nó là những kéo và bao sắp kéo nhà.
She only said that the child, after the oldest, had lost the job, and the bank is taking that house.
Did you two do anything together besides talking?
Thì hai người còn làm cái gì cùng với nhau nữa không ngoài cái việc nói chuyện?
Chúng tôi cầu nguyện, cầu kinh cầu nguyện.
We prayed, we said prayers and prayed.
And what were her prayers that you heard?
Và cái lời cầu nguyện của bà ta là gì thì nghe được?
Bà hay cầu nguyện tới Holy Mother.
She used to pray to the Holy Mother.
Để là cái gia đình
For the family to be at peace and happy.
Did she say anything about what she hoped might happen that night?
Bà ta có nói gì về cái mong muốn của bà ta khi xảy ra tôi phản đối thực hiện.
What about how loud your father was in addressing your mother? Did you make any observations of that?
Yes. Sometimes it is very loud. The roots from the whole house from here.
And you said sometimes, so it wasn't all the time. Is that correct?
Yes.
How often did you hear the loud? Or what word would you use to describe that loud voice? What kind of talking or yelling or shouting? What word would you use to refer to that?
During a conflict, that voice will come up.
And would you refer to that as yelling?
Yes.
How often did you hear your father yell at your mother? To the best of your memory.
Sometimes constantly, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly, until he gets what he wants.
And during what period of years are you speaking? From the time when you were born to the time that your mother died? With respect to that yelling.
Do you want to hear about it?
No, James, just don't know when the questions first. So how long has that been going on? That kind of
Probably the time I know what. Her marriage.
as far as you can remember?
Yes.
Did that conflict have any impact on you?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you do in response?
Starting from high school, I started to stop talking. I started to stop eating in the family dinner or meal. I stopped ever since. And then when there was conflict, I tried to stay in the middle, try to resolve the issue.
Did you ever speak to your parents or to your father?
Yes, I brought them together at least once.
And did you eventually do something with respect to where you live as a result of the conflict?
Yes,
What did you do?
I moved away. There was a time that I supposed to came back to Vietnam and engaged, but a week before that, there was something came up and there was a fight. And the never talked to him to plan for my engagement and why, but I never come to him and talk to him about like what my plan is to go back to engagement. And he would sit down and talk to me and tell me about what he thinks that I should be preparing for having a wife. Can I continue about that conversation?
Yeah, I just would like to know, could you clarify at what time you moved out of the house? You said you moved
A few days after that incident.
Do you remember, with comparing it to when your mother died, was that the same year?
No,
a couple
I
years
think
before?
a few years. I think it's 2009 or so that I moved away.
So after you moved out in 2009, did you ever move back in before your mother died?
No.
In the spring of 2011, where were you living?
I was living in Lowell.
And where was you have a brother named McKinley who was married to Shane, is that correct?
Yes.
And where were they living at that time, the spring of 2011?
They were working on Walker Street Road.
And how about your sister T, where was she living at that time?
She was back all between the house and on the cross.
And your sister too?
She is between the house and her boyfriend's house.
In the spring of 2011, where were you working?
I was unemployed since March, and then I just...
So you were employed up to March.
Yes.
Where?
Textron event system.
And you lost your job?
Yes. I was furloughed.
And when you lost your job, did your father speak with you about concerns, or did you not speak with your father about concerns?
I wasn't taught anything. That my brother sister know about that.
I'd like to direct your attention to the week prior to your mother's death. Did you have a conversation, or did you receive a phone call from your father that week?
Yes.
Recall what day of the week you received that relative to your mother's death.
Probably a night before perhaps.
What did he ask you, if anything, during that phone call?
He asked me to come back to the house, and he said that your mom is leaving, so I will be yelling by anymore, but I refused to come back.
And so you told him no, you weren't going to
No.
back in with him?
No.
How about your mother? Did you speak with your mother that night?
Yes, like a few minutes after I talked to him.
In person or by phone?
By phone.
And it was right after you talked to your father?
Yes, I'll be either before or after.
What did she tell you about those plans?
She asked me to come back and help, and she got to move away. If anything, she would try to go and work somehow. Like she said, she may go to her friend's place and babysit or something and try to send back money to help me out.
Was this the first time that you had discussed with your mother leaving your father?
No.
How many times had that come up in the past?
She talked about it many times, but the last time was she took more action on it. The first time was last December. She was putting letter and everything, and she gave it to me, and she gave me the reason why she left. And then my sister, I believe, bought her plane ticket, and I gave her around $300 to $400 for the trip. But then my brother, his wife, somehow.
Objection to what his brother might do.
Okay, next question.
On April 28, 2011, Brian, do you recall what you were doing in the early evening?
On the 28th, I teaching ball dancing in Shrewsbury.
Was that an extra job you had in addition to your other job?
Yes.
Did you receive a phone call at some point?
Yes, after I finished teaching. I look at
About what time did you receive a phone call? From
around 7 something.
Oh, did you pick up the phone at some point after you finished teaching to have a conversation with someone?
Yes.
Who was that with?
My brother.
And do you remember roughly what time that occurred?
Probably around 9 or so.
And after that, did you look at your phone?
Yes.
What, if anything, did you notice on your phone at that time?
My father left me a voice message.
And how many calls did you see from your father on your phone that you missed?
One.
And how many voicemails were there?
One.
And did you listen to that voicemail?
Yes.
Did you recognize the voice?
Yes.
Whose voice was it?
My father.
What did the voice message say?
He called me and said, call him. You need to talk to him.
And how did his voice sound?
Very calm.
As a result of receiving the call from McKinley without saying what he told you, did you do something?
Yes, I immediately left and went home tomorrow.
While you were on the way, did you receive any other phone calls?
Yes, my brother called the second time.
And he told you something during that phone call without saying what it was?
I asked why mom died, and he told me.
Objection sustained, the answer is strict. From time to time, a lawyer might ask me to strike an answer that means you're not to consider the disregard of the total word what I said, not to take into account the deliberation.
So you had a conversation with McKinley, just yes or no?
Yes.
And did you arrive at 34 Walnut Street?
Yes.
What did you do when you arrived?
I was there with my sibling and I corrected him.
So there were members of your family already there?
Yes.
And did you speak with police?
Not really.
Did you go to the police station a little bit later to speak with police?
Yes.
And did you drive someone else there too?
Yes.
Who did you drive there?
I believe my sister, my young sister, she.
I'm going to hand you Exhibit 28 just to look at. Do you recognize this picture?
Yes.
Okay, let's put it up to the jury now. Where is this picture located? What house or residence?
At my house, 34 Water Street, and that is in the bathroom of the first floor.
Did you yourself see the bathroom at 34 Walnut Street in that condition?
Yes, I was the one cleaning up that mess.
That's objection to his description of the situation. Directing your attention to the center of the photograph. When you cleaned up the bathroom, did you look at and retrieve this item from the floor that's depicted in the photograph in the center?
No.
Did you see it when you cleaned it up?
That I do not remember.
Well, do you recognize this item?
Yes.
What is this item?
I believe that could be my long bracelet.
Whole life it never stopped.
Could you explain to the jury what you mean by verbal and mental abuse? Of one person by another, or of both people back and forth?
Just him doing it to her. She never had the guts to spoke up to him. She never had the guts to yell back at him.
objection, just miscalculation.
Okay, I'm going to allow it with, again, the caution and limit of the use of this type of evidence. It is not proof of having committed a particular crime or crimes that the defendant is charged with. You may consider this type of evidence as to relationship evidences of conflict. You may consider that solely on the limited issue of motive, opportunity, state of mind, intent, preparation, plan, or pattern of conduct, or a relationship between the parties. You may not consider the evidence for any other purpose. Specifically, you may not use it to conclude that if the defendant committed the other act, he must have also committed this charge.
When you mentioned yelling, what type of yelling did you hear? About what type of thing?
It's just belittling her, He would just say it in a loud voice, even in front of people, when we have people over for dinner. He would just call her names, like, she's stupid, she doesn't understand anything, He would say that in front of people. He did not go back at all.
And you heard that yourself?
Yes.
What, if anything, or how did your mother respond to that type of yelling?
She was always scared. She couldn't do anything. She didn't do anything. All she did was pray about it, that he would stop doing that to her. That's what she told me every single time. She said she can only pray about it.
Did that conflict have an impact on you?
Yes, it did. It made me very angry, and it made me not want to live there because I didn't want to go out in that type of environment. I didn't want to continue. I didn't want to see that. I didn't want my personality to become weak. I didn't want to be angry. I wanted to move out. I just said, this is nonsense.
I like to think that works. Because we've seen it sidebar, if that objection is going to be entertained by the court.
Do you want to be heard?
Judge, I just know, it's non-responsive, and I think it's not. We're moving on.
Okay. On that basis, I'll question the objection request of you, Mr. Dodd. Another question, please.
So you say you didn't want to live there because of the conflict. Did you do something about that?
I moved away. I lived with my girlfriend.
And when was that?
I was about 19 years old.
And you testified earlier that at some point you moved back.
Yes.
Why did you move back?
I wanted to move back to protect my brother, my mother, because my brothers had moved out.
So in the spring of 2011, you were living at 34 Walnut Street, is that correct?
Yes.
And sometimes would you stay with your boyfriend?
Seldom. I always slept there at my house.
I'd like to draw your attention to the week prior to your mother's death. Were you present in the home on the Thursday before Easter weekend in 2011?
I was present.
Was there, do you have a memory of a particular argument that occurred on or about that time?
Yes, it's about a mass health letter.
Could you please explain what happened and what you heard occur during that argument?
Well, my mother asked me, to translate that letter for her, and called them for her, and then I gave it back. And then
And what kind of a letter was that?
It was from Mass Health.
And your mother asked you for help?
Yes, translating it because she said she kind of understand it, but not totally. So all it said on that letter was that she needed to be assigned a personal care doctor, which I called and helped her with that. So I gave her a letter back, and I told her that she's been assigned a doctor, and now she can just go see her doctor. So I gave the letter back to her, and she took the letter back in the living room table.
And did something happen when she did that?
Yes.
What happened?
The Tran asked her why she took that letter without his permission and read it.
What tone of voice did he use when he asked that?
He used a very loud, angry voice.
And what happened next?
Next, I just asked him to stop it, because she gave the letter back to him already, and the letter had her name on it. So, that's all I said. Just say, she already gave the letter back to you, that's it. And
What was your father's response to you saying that?
my father's response, he got angry because he said that she shouldn't have read it without his permission. She should have not opened it without his permission, with him looking at it first.
And what do you recall happening after that?
After that, my mom just went back in her room, and then he just continued just yelling, belittling her, just saying that she has no permission, she doesn't know how to read it, so she can't open it, and every letter, everything has to go through the purse. So why would she even open it?
Did you have any other comments to your father?
Yes, I did. I just asked him to stop.
And did he say things back to you?
Yes, he did. He just go on blaming me, saying things about me, just making things up, just making me angry, just telling me the bad things just making up bad things that I did, which I didn't do.
Was anyone else present at that time?
Yes, my boyfriend.
And did he become involved or was he not involved?
Yes, he was very angry. He just watched the fight and then he got really angry and he just told him to shut up.
And what happened when he told him to shut up?
It just got worse. He was so heated. He just continued arguing louder and louder.
I don't even know who you're speaking about. When you said
Ngoc Tran spoke louder and louder. He didn't want anyone to speak over him. He just yelled. Used all his might.
And where was your mother during that point?
She was in her room.
Did you hear anything from your mother?
Actually, she was not in her room. She left the room and she went to the bathroom. She was in the bathroom taking a shower.
And did she make any comments that you heard?
Yes, she did. I heard her crying and she asked us to please both be quiet or else she will hit her head against the wall and she will die.
How did that fighting stop?
That fight stopped when I asked her to leave. Please leave now. Because I told her that it would not be safe here.
And tell us what happened next.
She agreed, and I took her to a church.
And then tell us what you remember happening after you took her to church. Did you return at some point to the house?
No, I did not after that because I felt there was tension between me and my father and I should not step inside the house again because I did not want the tension to grow. So therefore I stayed in my boyfriend's house,
Until your mother died?
Yes,
So was that a period of a few days?
yes.
During those days, did you keep in touch with your mother back home?
Yes, I did.
Did you speak with your mother on the day that she died?
Yes, I did.
Would you please tell us about that conversation?
I told her that I had found an apartment that I think I could afford across from my old high school, which was Lowell High School, called River Tower Place. And I told her that when we have an appointment to see it that Saturday, that she has to come with me and we'll look at it together.
And what was her response to that idea?
She sounded very happy that I found a place. And she just sounded very happy. I didn't sense anything else.
Was that the last time that you spoke with her?
Yes, that was the last time I spoke with her.
That night, did you receive a call from your brother McKinley to come to the house?
Yes, I did.
And you did that?
Yes.
And did you go inside the house that night or not?
No, I couldn't go inside the house.
The police had closed it off, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you recognize the photograph?
my mother and my younger sister.
Where is the photograph taken?
It's taken at church.
Do you know when that photograph was taken?
Around the holidays, sometime maybe Christmas.
Who took that photograph?
I took it.
This time around, you remarks as a number.
No objection to this.
Number 53 is on that.
Came over from Vietnam at a very young age, didn't you?
Yes.
And your mother and father had been married in Vietnam, right?
Correct.
And they were older when they came over here.
Correct.
And they very much subscribed to the Vietnam culture.
Correct.
In the Vietnam culture, the culture that raised both your parents, the father was the head of the household.
Correct.
Much more so than this country, fair to say.
Correct.
And this was the situation in your house. Your father was the head of the household.
Correct.
And you didn't subscribe to that theory, did you? You're very American, aren't you?
No, I thought my Vietnamese ways too.
You don't believe in the man at the head of the household theory, do you?
No, I believe it, but a man should treat a woman with respect. That's what I believe in.
In the Vietnamese culture, the father is the head of the house and has the final say in everything. Correct?
Correct.
You and your father straight up. You didn't stay at your mother's house, in your father's house, for at least a week prior to her death, right?
Excuse me.
You didn't stay at 34 Walnut Street for at least a week prior to her death.
Yes, I did. I lived there.
You just said that after the argument with the letter,
Oh,
you didn't stay at the
Yeah, I did stay at the house. I thought you were saying it before that.
No, after the
I'm
letter.
sorry.
So there was at least a week prior to your mother dying, you did not stay at the house.
Correct.
And the last time that you had seen your mother was when you took her to the church, right?
Correct.
Now, your mother would go to church on a regular basis?
Yes.
Your mother would visit friends, correct?
Seldom.
She visited friends, didn't she?
She did.
And she traveled to Vietnam on a number of occasions, did she not?
Yes, she did.
And she had her own bank account, did she not?
Yes, she did.
And you testified that you paid for your father's cell phone bill, right?
Yes.
In fact, your siblings, the family chipped in to maintain the household at 34 Walnut Street, right?
Correct.
And that's to me, and towards the end, just prior to your mother's death, the financial situation of the household was getting worsening, correct?
How was it getting worsening? We paid the bill.
Well,
We were able to afford the bill.
well, you were aware then that your brother Brian had lost his job, right?
Yes.
And that he was the primary mortgage payer, wasn't he?
Yes.
And that your mother and father were not working, right?
Correct.
You testified from Ms. McGovern that there had been an argument about a week before your mother's death, right?
Correct.
And during that argument, what you described as a very loud, berating argument was heard over a letter from that house. Correct?
Correct.
And during that argument, you became embroiled and involved in an argument with your father, right?
Correct. But this is not normal in the history of it.
Excuse me, can I ask you a question?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And the argument was, I'm talking about the day of the argument that you just talked about was over a letter from Mass Health that your mother opened, right?
Correct.
Now, your mother's English was not very good, was it?
No, it was not.
And she didn't read a lot of English, did she?
She did. She tried to.
She tried.
She went to school to learn English.
She didn't read a lot of English, did she?
No.
And in fact, usually, it was your father that would address the letters that came in English, because his English was slightly better than your mom, right?
Slightly, but he always took control.
Your father's English was slightly better than your mother's, right?
Slightly.
And in fact, your father was the one who started the process for the health insurance and the math health for the family. Fair to say?
Yeah, because he was controlling. He didn't let them do it.
Because he was controlling and he was Vietnamese and you lived in a Vietnamese household, right?
He didn't let her do it. If he let her, she would have done it.
If she didn't speak much English,
she could have got help.
On the day of this argument, your boyfriend became involved, right?
He said one thing, yes.
But he became involved in a family argument, did he not?
Yes.
But your boyfriend had lived at that house before, hadn't he?
Yes.
With you?
Yes.
And you were somewhat disrespectful to your father in the terms you used to him, were you not?
Of course, I disrespected my mother. I only stood up when he yelled at my mother. I did not disrespect her another time.
May I?
Let me get involved as a witness. I would ask you, ma'am, to do your best to answer the question. If it becomes necessary for the other prosecutor to follow up with what he should use after this statement is done.
Thank you. You became very disrespectful to your father, correct? And used terms in Vietnamese that was disrespectful to your father.
No, I did not.
You never referred to your father in a term that you would never ordinarily use with an adult parent as opposed to someone of your own age?
No, I would not.
You never used the word, excuse my pronunciation, tang, T-H-A-N-G, a word that is reserved for somebody of your own age and not then used in your culture for someone that's older than you?
I did not call him that. I never recall calling him that.
So you never recall calling him?
No.
Your boyfriend, is he Vietnamese?
No.
Cambodian?
Yes.
And your father, second. You talked to your mother about moving out with you?
Correct.
And she was agreeable to that? She was agreeable to move out with you?
Correct.
And was planning on doing so?
Can you repeat that question?
Planning on doing so, your mother?
I'm planning to do so?
Yes, with you, moving on with you.
Yes, yes.
And your father was going to see if your brother could move in with him, help with the household?
I didn't know about that. Someone told me about that after.
Because you didn't talk to your brother?
No.
And in fact, it's fair to say that you're much closer to your mother.
Yes.
It's fair to say that Brian's much closer to you than his mother. Correct?
I'm not sure. I can't speak for him.
You'll now live with Brian?
Excuse me?
You now live with Brian?
Yes.
And T, do you know where T lives when she's not at school?
She lives with McKinley.
You talked to your mother on the phone the day she died?
Yes, I did.
And she was happy?
She said so.
Talked to her in the morning?
I believe so.
Just one moment. Both of your parents, it's fair to say, worked very hard.
Correct.
When they came from Vietnam, right?
Correct.
And they both worked very hard to provide for you, your brothers and sisters, right?
I agree, yes.
So that you all could get an education, right?
Yes.
And you could all work for the betterment and to work for the family, right?
Correct.
And that was the goal of your parents.
Yes.
Nothing for the judge.
1981, by the North Vietnamese, they had a family in Vietnam, met a Vietnamese woman, his wife, and all 4 of his children were born in Vietnam. He told me about coming to the United States and his work here.
Did he tell you anything specific about the time that he was imprisoned in Vietnam?
Yes.
And did anything that he told you about his imprisonment impact your evaluation of him?
Well, I was interested in what happened in the prison situation because he was accused of a violent crime, and I wanted to assess his history of having to be either a perpetrator or a victim of violence. And I worked in jails and people who are in confined spaces, so I was very interested in his experience as a prisoner and his relationship with how it affected his later life.
And in fact, Dr. Tran, and after speaking to Mr. Tran about his imprisonment and him getting out of prison, you spoke to him about the events of later in his life. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And did he relate to you information about his later life that was significant in light of what you learned about his imprisonment?
He talked about life when he was in jail in Vietnam, and while he didn't present it, and I didn't see it as a particularly dramatic or traumatic set of events, it clearly demonstrated his capacity to endure things, endure hardship, endure some deprivation. It was difficult to get his information at an emotional level because it was being filtered through an interpreter. So I was sort of limited in the sense that I had to be concerned that he was giving some information, some emotionally laden information to the interpreter, who then had to filter that through her own experience and then find a way to do it in English to me. And I was concerned throughout the process that I wasn't getting a vivid telling of what happened, but I was satisfied that I got the major outlines.
Did you make any observations during your visits with him, meeting with him, of his emotional behavior? Did he exhibit any emotions?
You mean currently?
When you would meet with him and evaluate him.
He made moderately good eye contact. He had a very passive handshake. He's a very sort of accommodating man who seems to me to be quite passive.
By accommodating, what would you mean by that?
Well, he was. He didn't look intimidated, but he looked like he wanted to do what I wanted him to do. He didn't say yes, doctor. His demeanor was, I'm here because you want me here, and I will tell you whatever you need to know. He would periodically cry, though not often, and he answered almost all of my questions.
So, would compliance be a good word to describe him?
Yeah, he was compliant with anything that I needed, anything I wanted.
And Did he relate to you in your discussions with him of his perception of how his time incarcerated affected his life upon release from incarceration?
The major thing that he described post his incarceration in Vietnam was that his relationship with his wife changed. He described that before the incarceration, he felt like she was very affectionate and respectful of him, and I think admiring. It's not his word, it's my word. That he had an official position as a policeman or as somebody related to the military, and when he came out of prison in 1981, he described that he felt a distinct change from her, that he was of less consequence. He didn't have a well-paying job, he didn't have a position that was respected in the community. He was simply a newly released prisoner who had been on the wrong side of what ultimately happened in Vietnam.
In your opinion, do you have a sense of less importance in his life?
Excuse me?
You felt less important?
Yes, I did.
Now, you spoke to him, did you review any other documents or any documents in addition to speaking with Mr. Tran?
Yes, I read several documents.
Could we approach just one moment?
And he had been at Bridgewater back in the Cambridge jail already when I met him for the first time. And he talked about, we talked about his current state and how he was doing currently in jail.
And this was 7 months after?
Yes, the first time I met him was in December of 2011.
Thank you.
And he seemed okay. I didn't see any evidence of anything particularly odd about him aside from occasional tearfulness. Sometimes it occurred in relationship to what we were talking about. And other times it would just emerge and just become tearful and would stop. He carried a Bible. He talked about reading. He talked about being comfortable in the jail. He talked about that the corrections officers were nice to him and that he got along reasonably well with the other residents, inmates.
Did he discuss with you any issues that he was having about sleeping or anything like that?
Yeah, he took medication, I think, for sleep, also in the jail. But he had taken it for a long time and described that he had had trouble sleeping for a long time, several years.
And he described what those troubles were?
I think he had trouble falling asleep, but I don't remember a detailed discussion about it.
And did he discuss with you at all about having specific dreams about being killed?
Well, sometimes he talked about having violent dreams, and they were often triggered by his memories of friends that he lost in the years in Vietnam. And he would sometimes talk about the violence that he saw or heard at the time, but he usually referred it back to several years earlier, not in his current functioning.
Did he talk to you at all about having voices or hearing voices?
Yes, he said that he's had voices that he described as voices off and on for more than 15 years. I think he dated it to 1995.
And did he did he tell you anything about what those voices were telling you?
The most consistent thing he said was that he was leading an unhappy, unproductive life, and that he should end it, he should die, he should kill himself.
And he told you that he had these thoughts prior to April 2011?
Yes.
And his thoughts were that he should die, he should kill himself?
Yes.
Did he discuss with you how he did you have a discussion with Mr. Tran about how his mental state or what was controlling his mental state?
He talked sometimes with, I don't know if it was, I can't remember now if it was in response to my questions or spontaneously, but he would talk about that sometimes he felt like his life had been taken over, his thinking had been taken over by some foreign personage or voice or something. This was one of the areas in which the translation problem was very frustrating because it was hard to figure out exactly what he was talking about, whether he was talking about thoughts that were disruptive or thoughts that he didn't want to have, or whether he was actually having hallucinations or hearing voices. It was very difficult because I had great deal of difficulty getting him to clarify whether we were talking about his thinking or that he was hearing something. But he consistently used the idea of voices.
Did he in fact refer to them I'm sorry, did he in fact refer to them through the interpreters as his mind being controlled by a supernatural force?
Yes.
In his family life, we discussed with him at length his family life.
Yes.
And you testified earlier that he told you that he was actually at a loss of having power in his house.
Yes.
Did he indicate to you, in his mind, who the authority figure was in the house?
Yes, he was very open, I guess, about feeling that his role as an authority in the house or as the decider of things in the house was diminishing steadily over the years, and he attributed it, as I mentioned before, to the beginning, around the time when he came out of jail, to the current in which he felt like it had become progressively worse to the point where nobody was listening to him, nobody was paying attention to him. People did not defer to him about anything. He was particularly upset about the fact that his children were, not all of them, but two of his children, I think, were becoming less and less affectionate and deferential to him. He was concerned that his wife and his older daughter, too, had permitted a boyfriend of two to speak disrespectfully to him.
And speaking with Mr. Tran, these are things that he's relating to that he is feeling mentally in his mind as part of your evaluation. This is how you gather that information.
Yes, he's describing what happened in the house, and he's describing the reasons he felt so desperate and so sad and so much wanting to be dead, wanting to die.
Did he indicate to you at any specific time when he felt more as if he wanted to commit suicide? Let me clarify a little bit, Dr. Carroll. Did he tell you that when he's having troubles with his wife and children that it makes him more sad than suicide? That
He's having trouble what?
with his children and his wife, that he became more sad?
Yes, he described more than once that what he found most painful was that he felt that his wife's disrespect of him was being layered onto the children, and by example, the children were becoming less respectful to him, and that he viewed his wife as a toxic person who was, he used the word poisoning the children about him, against him. He was describing acutely pained by the passivity his wife showed in the face of the children behaving badly towards him.
When he spoke to you about his wife poisoning the minds of his children, did he indicate to you in any way that when this happened, that voices would tell him that he should die?
Yes.
So, and that was his answer to the resolving that situation?
Well, he didn't know. He described himself as feeling hopeless. He didn't know what to do. He felt like it was not fixable. He was in terrible pain, and he wanted to be dead. He wanted to not be experiencing that anymore, and started thinking in concrete terms about ending his life.
Was there anything else additionally that you took into consideration when arriving at your opinion of Mr. Tran's mental health? As far as your interviews and reports, that would be relevant.
I think that the part of the interviews that was most sort of central to my thinking about it was his planning for his own death over a period of at least a month or two. He said more. I think the earliest incident he gave me was when he had a discussion with his youngest daughter, T, about how to access his checking account, the fact that he wasn't going to need his cell phone because where he was going, there were no phone calls, or I don't remember exactly what it was, and I don't remember whether I heard all the details from conversation with T or Mr. Tran, but it was very consistent that he was preparing her for him not being there. She got it and started spending more time with him and worrying about him. In fact, they had planned, or at least one of them talked, I think it was T, talked about that they had at one point formulated a plan of one day living together, because he felt that the family was coming apart, which in fact made it pieces.
You indicated, just for clarification, that he referenced specifically one time a couple months prior to the death of his wife, a specific situation. But is it fair to say that he had related to other thoughts he had of suicide before that?
Yes, he said that he had been having thoughts about that he would be better off dead years before that.
Can you state, Dr. Krause, for reasons of believing medical certainty that Mr. Tran suffered from a mental illness?
I think that the time that this happened, he was acutely depressed, and his depression had reached the worst, and in my view, it met the standard for mental disease that is used for commitment proceedings, and it was affecting his perception, his memory, his judgment, his orientation, and it was affecting his behavior.
Is it fair to say that he suffered from a substantial disorder, thought, mood, perception, orientation, or memory, which impaired his judgment, behavior, capacity to recognize reality as that? What you're stating is true, or ability to meet the ordinary demands of life?
Yes.
As to his mental illness?
Yes.
And in arriving at that description and definition of mental illness, how would you apply that to Mr. Tran and his mental state that he had on April 28, 2011? He discussed the events of April 28, 2011. And when you discussed that with him, did he appear to be able to formulate any other rational resolution to his issues?
I think that as a consequence of the depression, Mr. Tran really could not think of alternatives to killing himself and ultimately to killing his wife. It was his belief that if he killed himself and she remained alive, she would continue to be toxic factor in the lives of the children. And he evidently made a decision that he was going to commit suicide, but he wanted to take her with him. The aspect of the consequences of the depression is that Mr. Tran didn't, as a result of being so depressed, see that there were alternatives to this. He didn't, when I asked him a couple of times, he really could not address my question very directly. He could have left her. He was not leaving her as the caretaker of young children. Their youngest child was 20. He was behaving in the days building up to this killing as if killing her and himself was the only solution to this. And in reality, there were several solutions short of anybody having to die.
But in his mind, Dr. Krause, could you go to page 17 of the report?
Page 17 of my report?
Please. It's the last, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, just you in your report stated the clinical arrived at after your interviews and reviewing documents and prior reports, arrived at a clinical opinion. Do you recall that clinical opinion?
Yes.
Could you please, do you need to refresh your memory by looking at your report?
I think, I think that my opinion is that he was acutely depressed, was suicidally depressed at that time, and had been for a few days or a week acutely depressed. and was not able to perceive things accurately, and was not able to control his own perceptions and his own orientation and his own appreciation of what was happening around him. And he was unable to entertain alternatives. And as a result, he made a terrible error in judgment, and it led to actions that were irretrievable and illegal and awful and permanent.
You described his depression, in your opinion, as being so acute and pervasive that it narrowed his thinking.
Yes.
And you also described his emotional state at that time as being a tunnel vision.
In what?
It gave him kind of emotional tunnel vision.
Yes.
And what did you mean by the term emotional tunnel vision? If you may explain.
That the only solution he saw to the problems he felt was for he and his wife to be dead.
So, because of his emotional television, he was unable to formulate any other alternatives to his situation, to fixing his situation.
Correct.
As to his depression, how did his depression affect his thinking? Did it cause him to be disoriented?
I think the main impact of his depression was that he was in sufficient pain, and said that he was sufficiently worried about his children that he could not problem solve. He could not entertain another solution.
So the depression caused severe impaired judgment and impaired his behavior.
Yes.
Just one moment. And in your clinical experience, Dr. Crow, again, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, is it your opinion that Mr. Tran, on April 28, 2011, is suffering from a mental illness?
Yes.
Nothing like this.
When they were doing it, at the time of their evaluations.
At the evaluations, yeah.
Yes, that's true.
And you also talked a lot about the defendant's history while he was in the police force and while he was in the re-education camps. And you said that you were interested in this history of the defendant being in a re-education camp because of the fact that it involved confined spaces and that part of your direct testimony, remember?
Yes.
Talking about that? But in fact, this defendant told you, and you reported it in your report, that while some of his friends were treated badly, he was treated better than the others because the UN was aware of his existence. That's on page 11 of your report.
That's right.
And he also told you that the memories of those years don't affect his life. That's also at the top of page 11 of your report.
Yes, that's what he said.
And he also told you about working successfully as a tech in Vietnam and the various jobs that he had in the U.S. at Wang Labs and other places, correct?
Correct.
And you, on direct examination, said that he made mention to you of this concept of voices in his head, right?
Yes, he felt that he was hearing voices.
But you, in fact, yourself in the report, essentially discarded the significance of that, parenthetically saying, quotation mark, perhaps thoughts, and quotation mark, correct?
Well, I didn't know which it was. So I didn't discard it, I just didn't know which it was.
You certainly didn't find evidence of any command hallucinations or delusions, did you, Dr. Crown?
No, I wouldn't say he was psychotic if I did.
And you did not find
No.
that, did you? And you also did not find any evidence and no prior hospitalizations for psychiatric, psychological reasons of this defendant. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And when you mentioned that you saw this defendant 7 months after the alleged crime, and you mentioned that he had been released from, or moved from Bridgewater to the jail. In fact, in your own report, you note that he'd been at the jail when you saw him for 6 months already.
Yes.
And Bridgewater had no reason to keep this defendant. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
So you weren't trying to suggest to the jury that he had been hospitalized previously to your seeing him, were you?
No.
Now you also agree that this defendant had never taken psychotropic, that is, the kind of medications that are used to treat mental illnesses. And this defendant never took psychotropic medications before the alleged offense, to your knowledge. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And also, after the alleged crimes, he's never had any psychotropic medications.
That's correct.
And he reported to you, and you listened attentively to symptoms that he reported that you raised symptoms of depression, and yet immediately after killing his wife, you reviewed reports where he self-reported no mood disturbances and reported being happy within days of the event. Isn't that correct?
Aside from wanting to be dead.
He did report that he was happy, though, didn't he?
Well, in the
report that you reviewed.
Yes, there were parts of reports in which he said happy, and there were parts of the reports in which he said, I'd like to be dead.
Well, you did cite yourself on page 6 of your report, a discharge summary of